The steering wheel felt cold and slick beneath my clammy hands. 11 years. It had been 11 years since I'd driven down this street, a street lined with identical maple trees whose leaves were just beginning to blush with the first hints of autumn. 11 years since the house at the end of the cul-de-sac had been my prison. Now it was a fortress, and I was laying siege. In my head, a speech had been rehearsing itself on a loop for the entire 6-hour drive. Sterling, I know how this looks. I know what you think of me. But I'm different now. I've grown up. I'm ready. It sounded reasonable in the sterile quiet of my car, the words polished and sane. But as I pulled up to the curb, the sight of the house, the same pale blue siding, the slightly crooked mailbox, sent a tremor of the old panic through me. This wasn't just a house. It was a monument to the life I'd fled. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back was 32, not 21. There were fine lines around my eyes, a confidence in my jaw that hadn't existed back then. The wild, dark hair of my youth was tamed into a sleek, professional cut. I was stable. I had a good job in marketing, a supportive boyfriend, Vaughn, and a quiet sense of self I'd spent a decade clawing for. I was ready. I had to be. He's not going to understand, a voice whispered in my mind. The same voice that had told me to run all those years ago. I silenced it. He didn't have to understand. He just had to listen. I took a deep breath, the air tasting of cut grass and impending confrontation, and got out of the car. Each step up the flagstone path felt heavy, as if I were wading through the thick mud of the past. The porch swing Sterling's father had built for us was still there, swaying gently in the breeze. A ghost of me, a terrified 1-year-old with a baby on her hip, seemed to flicker on it for a moment. I raised my hand, my knuckles hovering over the solid oak door. I wasn't that girl anymore. I wasn't abandoning Silas. I was giving him a mother who wasn't drowning. That's what I told myself. That's what had to be true. I knocked. 3 sharp raps that echoed in the quiet evening. Seconds stretched into an eternity. I heard footsteps, heavy and deliberate. The lock turned with a familiar metallic click. The door swung open. And there he was. Sterling. 11 years had carved new lines onto his face, flanking a mouth that was now set in a permanent, thin line. His hair had threads of gray at the temples, and the easy smile I'd once fallen for was gone, replaced by a weariness that settled deep in his eyes. But the moment those eyes landed on me, the weariness was burned away by a flash of pure, unadulterated shock, quickly followed by something much colder. Contempt. "Corinne," he said. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. My carefully rehearsed speech evaporated. "Sterling." "Hi." He didn't move. Didn't invite me in. He stood there, a human barricade between me and the life inside that house. "What are you doing here?" I came to talk. To you. About Silas." The name felt foreign on my tongue, a precious stone I hadn't earned the right to hold. A bitter, humorless laugh escaped his lips. "About Silas? You lost the right to talk about Silas 11 years ago when you packed a bag and disappeared in the middle of the night." "That's not fair," I said, my voice rising. "I was a kid. I was scared. You were suffocating me, Sterling. You worked 80 hours a week and expected me to sit here and play happy homemaker like my life's ambition was to sort laundry." "My life's ambition was to provide for my family," he shot back, his voice low and dangerous. "A family you decided was an inconvenience." It wasn't an inconvenience. It was a trap. I could feel the old anger, the familiar sense of being misunderstood, bubbling up inside me. Everyone praised you, the hero provider, while I was supposed to just vanish into this role of mother, as if Corinne ceased to exist. I was drowning. Leaving was the most mature thing I could have done. I gave him a chance at a stable life with you instead of a life with a mother who was falling apart. End of show. He stared at me, his expression unreadable. For a heart-stopping moment, I thought he was listening. I thought maybe he could see the terrified girl I had been. "You've had 11 years to work on that story, haven't you?" he said, his voice dripping with venom. "You've polished it up so you can sleep at night. You didn't give him a chance at stability, Corinne. You inflicted a wound. You abandoned him. You abandoned us." The word abandoned hit me like a physical blow. He wielded it like a weapon. "I'm different now," I pleaded, my composure crumbling. "I'm not that person anymore. I'm with someone, Vaughn. I have a good life. I'm finally ready to be the mom Silas deserves. Sterling actually took a step back, as if my words were toxic. The mom he deserves? The mom he deserves has been here every single day for the last 4,025 days. She's been here for fevers and scraped knees and nightmares. She's been here for school plays and parent-teacher conferences. Where have you been, Corinne? Off finding yourself on some extended vacation? It wasn't a vacation, I yelled, tears of frustration stinging my eyes. I was working dead-end jobs, living in crappy apartments, trying to become a person someone could rely on. You think it was easy? I don't really care if it was easy, he said, his voice flat and final. Silas is my son. He has a good life. A happy, peaceful life. And you are not going to come back here and detonate it just because you've suddenly decided you're ready to play house again. He started to close the door. Panic seized me. Sterling, wait, please, I have rights. You have nothing, he said, his eyes as hard as granite. You gave up your rights when you walked out that door. And then he slammed it shut. The solid thud of the oak door echoed in the twilight, a definitive, brutal finality. I stood on the porch, trembling with a rage so profound it left me breathless. It was the same old Sterling, the same controlling man who thought he knew what was best for everyone. He hadn't changed at all. I walked back to my car. The carefully constructed adult I'd become shattering with every step. I wasn't just here to talk anymore. This was a fight. And if he thought I was going to run away again, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. My sister Daphne's apartment smelled of lavender and judgment. She'd let me in with a sigh, her expression a careful mask of neutrality that did nothing to hide her disapproval. I sat on her stiff gray sofa, the silence between us as heavy as a shroud. He slammed the door in my face. I said, finally, to the empty space between us. Daphne finished wiping down her already immaculate kitchen counter. What did you expect, Corinne? A welcome home parade? I expected a conversation. I expected him to be an adult about it. He is an adult about it, she said, turning to face me, her arms crossed. He's being an adult for his son. Silas has a routine, a life. You can't just show up after a decade and expect to be slotted back in like a missing puzzle piece. You're not a piece, Corinne. You're a wrecking ball. Her words stung, but I pushed the hurt down. She didn't understand. No one did. They saw the act, not the reasons. I'm his mother, Daphne. You were his mother for 7 months, she countered, her voice softening slightly, which was somehow worse. Sterling has been his mother and his father for 11 years. I left before I could say something I'd regret. Her sympathy felt like pity, and her judgment felt like a betrayal. I drove aimlessly for an hour, the streetlights blurring through my tears. I was isolated. Sterling had built his fortress, and it seemed the whole world was standing guard for him. Then an idea surfaced. There was one person who had never completely cut me off. One person who had always seemed to understand the crushing weight of motherhood. Lorraine, Sterling's mother. Over the years, I'd sent her Christmas cards with generic, cheerful messages. A few times, on lonely nights fueled by cheap wine, I'd called her. She was always polite, reserved, but she listened. She had to be my way in. I pulled over and found her number in my contacts. My thumb hovered over the call button. This was a gamble. She was his mother, after all. But I was desperate. I pressed the button. She picked up on the third ring. Hello? Lorraine? It's Corinne. There was a pause, a sharp intake of breath. Corinne, my goodness, is everything all right? I'm fine. I'm back in town. I saw Sterling last night. Oh, she said. The single word heavy with meaning. I see. He wasn't very receptive, I said, aiming for understatement. Lorraine, I know I made a huge mistake. I've spent every day of the last 11 years regretting it. But I'm better now. I'm stable. I just want a chance to know my son. She was quiet for a long moment. I could hear the ticking of a grandfather clock in the background. He's a wonderful boy, Corinne, she said finally, her voice soft. He's so smart, top of his class in science. And he has a wicked sense of humor. He gets that from you, you know. And he has your eyes. Exactly your eyes. A wave of warmth and grief washed over me. My eyes. A part of me was still there, looking out at a world I wasn't in. Hope flickered inside me. She understood. I just want to see him, I whispered. Sterling is just Protective, she said, her tone shifting, becoming more cautious. He's had to be. It hasn't been easy. He's done his best to shield Silas from questions. Questions about me? Yes. It's a delicate subject. Sterling told him. Well, he had to tell him something. My heart pounded in my chest. This was it. The story Silas had been told. What did he tell him, Lorraine? Another pause. The clock ticked on. He told Silas that his mother was very sick when he was born, that she had a sickness in her mind that meant she couldn't take care of a baby, and that she had to go away to get better. The word hit me with the force of a physical blow. Sick. Not young. Not scared. Not overwhelmed. Sick. Sterling hadn't just told a lie. He had rewritten my history. He'd pathologized my pain, turning my desperate act of self-preservation into a symptom of mental illness. He had painted me as broken, unstable, a cautionary tale. It was a brilliant, cruel narrative. It made him the noble protector, the strong father shielding his son from a damaged mother. And it made me the villain, not by choice, but by defect. I wasn't sick, Lorraine, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. I had postpartum depression. I was 21 and completely alone in that house while Sterling played the corporate hero. I needed support, not a diagnosis. He did his best, dear, she said, her voice now carrying the faint, unmistakable echo of a rehearsed script. It was a difficult situation for everyone. The hope that had flickered inside me was extinguished, replaced by an icy rage. She wasn't my ally. She was a gatekeeper, another guard at the fortress, repeating the official story. He hadn't just turned our son against me. He had turned his entire family against me with a single, devastatingly effective lie. I ended the call, my mind reeling. This was so much bigger than just a custody dispute. This was a fight for my own sanity, for my own story. Sterling hadn't just closed a door in my face. He had tried to erase the woman who had walked out of it. And I was going to prove to everyone, starting with my son, that I was not a ghost. I was real. The need to see him was a physical ache, a gnawing hunger in the pit of my stomach. Not just a picture, not just an anecdote from Lorraine. I needed to see him in the flesh. I needed to see what 11 years had created. I found the name of his middle school online. Belmont Middle. It sounded so wholesome, so suburban. The next afternoon, I found myself parked across the street, my car tucked behind a large oak tree, feeling like a private detective in a cheap novel. The bell rang, a shrill sound that sent a jolt through me. Doors burst open, and a river of children flooded out into the autumn sunshine. They were a chaotic sea of backpacks, hoodies, and shouting voices. My eyes scanned the crowd frantically, searching for a face I only knew from a baby picture. I was looking for my eyes, for Sterling's stubborn jawline. And then I saw him. It was like my heart stopped and started again in the same second. He was taller than I'd imagined, lanky and all limbs like a young colt. His dark hair fell over his forehead, the exact same shade as mine. He was laughing with a group of friends, his head thrown back, and the sound, faint as it was, seemed to travel directly into my soul. He was happy. He was whole. He was a complete stranger. A tidal wave of conflicting emotions crashed over me. Pride, so fierce it took my breath away. I made that beautiful, happy boy. And anger, a hot, searing rage, I wasn't here for any of it. I missed his first steps, his first words, his first day of school. Sterling had collected all of those firsts, hoarding them like treasure, while I was out in the wilderness trying to piece myself back together. A familiar silver SUV pulled up to the curb, and my breath caught in my throat. Sterling. He got out, a tired slump to his shoulders, but his face broke into a genuine smile when he saw Silas. My son ran over, slinging his backpack into the car. They exchanged a few words. Sterling ruffled his hair, and Silas grinned. It was a simple, everyday moment of paternal affection. It was a dagger in my heart. I watched them, a ghost in a parked car, an invisible outsider looking in on the life that should have been mine. This was the picture Sterling had painted for the world, the devoted single dad and his well-adjusted son, a perfect little family, built on the foundation of my absence and my supposed sickness. As their car pulled away, the anger solidified into something harder, colder. Resolve. I wasn't going to spend another minute as a ghost. I had let Sterling write the story for 11 years. Now, it was my turn to pick up the pen. The image of Sterling and Silas laughing together was seared into my brain. It was proof that emotional appeals were useless. Sterling had built a world that didn't need me, and he would fight to the death to protect it. If I was going to get through, I needed more than just a sense of righteous indignation. I needed leverage. I needed a strategy. I spent the rest of the day in a coffee shop, hunched over my laptop, diving into the labyrinth of family law. The jargon was dense: custody, visitation, parental rights, establishment of paternity, but with every article I read, a sense of power began to replace the helpless rage. And then I found it: the golden ticket. In this state, parental rights are not automatically terminated by absence. Unless a court had officially ruled otherwise, I was still, legally, Silas's mother. I had rights. The words glowed on the screen, a beacon of hope. Sterling couldn't just decide I didn't exist. The law said I did. A surge of adrenaline, pure and empowering, shot through me. I wasn't a supplicant begging for scraps from his table anymore. I was a legal parent with a claim. That evening, I called Vaughn. His calm, steady voice was an anchor in my storm of emotions. "How are you holding up?" he asked, his concern genuine. I told him everything: the confrontation with Sterling, the devastating conversation with Lorraine, the gut-wrenching experience of seeing Silas at school. And then I told him about my research. "I have rights, Vaughn," I said, the words feeling solid and real as I spoke them aloud. "He can't just shut me out." "Of course you do," he said, his support unwavering. "Corinne, you have spent the last decade becoming this incredible, strong woman. You're stable, you're loving, you're ready. Don't let him make you feel like that scared 1-year-old girl again. You're not her. He has everyone believing his story, that I was sick." Then you'll have to tell them your story," Vaughn said simply. He had 11 years to build his narrative. "It's going to take more than one conversation to build yours. What's your next move?" His question clarified everything. My next move couldn't be another desperate knock on the door. It had to be a statement. It had to be permanent. "I'm staying," I said, the decision forming as the words left my mouth. "I'm going to find an apartment. I'm going to get my resume out there. I'm going to build a life here, a life that includes Silas." "I'm with you," Vaughn said without a moment's hesitation. "Whatever you need." Hanging up the phone, I felt a profound sense of clarity. For the first time since I'd arrived, I had a plan that went beyond emotion. Sterling thought he could scare me away with his anger. He was banking on me being the same girl who ran when things got hard. But he was wrong. I wasn't running anymore. I was digging in. I was laying a foundation. I wasn't just visiting. I was moving home. My newfound resolve was put to the test the very next day. In a moment of what I told myself was proactive parenting, I decided to stop by Silas's school office. I wasn't going to cause a scene. I just wanted to introduce myself, get on the mailing list for school events, perhaps. A small, simple step toward being involved. The school secretary was a pleasant woman with kind eyes, but as soon as I said my name and explained my relationship to Silas Sterling, a subtle shudder came down over her face. She typed something into her computer, her brow furrowing. "I'm sorry, Ms. It's still Sterling legally," I said. "Miss Sterling. Our records list Sterling as the sole primary guardian. All communications, permissions, and emergency contacts go through him. If you'd like to be added, we'd need a written signed request from him." Another wall. A bureaucratic wall, but a wall nonetheless. One Sterling had clearly built years ago. He had systematically, meticulously, erased me from every official part of our son's life. I thanked the secretary, my smile feeling brittle and fake, and walked out into the parking lot, my fists clenched. The frustration was a physical thing, a hot coil in my stomach. He had locked me out legally, socially, and emotionally, and he was using our son as the key. Driving back to Daphne's apartment, my mind went to a darker place. If he wanted to play this game, a game of systems and rules designed to exclude me, then I would have to stop playing fair. If he wanted a fight, I would give him a war. My mind, a place I had worked so hard to clean and organize, began to open dusty, locked rooms from the past. I started to remember the Sterling he probably hoped I'd forgotten. I remembered the nights he'd come home from work, wound so tight from stress that the slightest thing would set him off: a spilled glass of milk, a misplaced set of keys. I remembered the chilling dent in the drywall of our old bedroom, shaped perfectly like his knuckles. I remembered his boys' nights, which were less about friendship and more about the amount of bourbon he could consume. He thought I didn't notice how many times he'd call Lorraine to come over and watch Silas, claiming he had to work late, only to stumble home hours later smelling of alcohol and cheap cigars. He had built this pristine image of the martyr single dad, the hero. But I knew the truth. I knew about his anger. I knew about his drinking. I knew about all the times he put his own needs ahead of our son's, even when I was gone. A cold, ugly thought took root in my mind. Two can play at character assassination. I immediately felt a pang of guilt. This wasn't who I was anymore. I was the mature, stable one. But another voice, a harder, more cynical one, pushed back. He's poisoning your son against you with a lie about your mental health. All's fair in love and war. I justified it to myself. I wasn't doing this to hurt Sterling. Not really. I was doing it to give Silas the truth. My son deserved to know his real mother, not the cartoon villain Sterling had created. He also deserved to know his father wasn't the saint he pretended to be. This wasn't about revenge. It was about balance. It was about leveling a playing field that had been tilted against me for a decade. The line between fighting for my son and fighting against his father blurred until it disappeared entirely. That evening, sitting in the oppressive quiet of my sister's spare room, I didn't search for apartments or jobs. I searched for the top-rated family law attorneys in the county. I scrolled through their professional headshots and promises of aggressive representation. I found one, a woman named Miss Albright, whose bio radiated a no-nonsense competence. I picked up my phone, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was it. This was the point of no return. I was done asking. I was done trying to reason with him. I was done being the ghost. It was time to show Sterling, and the whole world, that I was real, and I had teeth. I dialed her number. Miss Albright's office was a study in beige and quiet intimidation. The chairs were unforgivingly firm, and the air smelled of old paper and expensive perfume. She was a sharp, immaculately dressed woman in her 50s, with eyes that seemed to see right through my carefully constructed composure and into the chaotic mess of my past. I told her everything. I didn't try to sugarcoat my departure. I laid out the fear, the postpartum depression, the feeling of being trapped. Then I detailed Sterling's absolute rejection, Lorraine's story about my sickness, and the bureaucratic walls at the school. I even, reluctantly, told her about Sterling's past issues with anger and drinking. I watched her face for any sign of judgment, but her expression remained impassive as she took meticulous notes. When I was finished, a raw silence hung in the air. "Well," she said, setting down her pen, "he's certainly built a comprehensive narrative, but it's not airtight. You never signed away your parental rights. You are, in the eyes of the law, still Silas's mother. That gives us a place to start." She laid out a plan. It was methodical, cold, and terrifyingly real. We would start by sending a formal letter from her office to Sterling, requesting a mediated meeting to discuss a formal visitation schedule. This would take it out of the realm of shouting matches on the porch and put it into a legal framework. "He will likely refuse," she warned. "From what you've told me, his entire identity for the past decade has been built on being the sole parent. Your return threatens that. When he refuses, we file a petition with the court to establish a parenting plan. We will ask for phased-in visitation, starting with supervised visits and moving toward unsupervised weekends. And if he fights it? If he tells the court I'm unstable?" "He will," Miss Albright said without blinking. "He will use the fact that you left. He will use your 11-year absence. That is his strongest card. Our job is to show that you are not the same person who left. We will gather evidence of your stability, your employment history, your financial records, character references. Your partner, Vaughn, will be a key witness. We will paint a picture of a woman who made a difficult, perhaps misguided, choice as a young adult and has spent the intervening years becoming a responsible person who is now ready and able to be a parent." She paused, her gaze intense. "This will be ugly, Corinne. It will be expensive. And it will be emotionally draining. He will say things about you in a public record that will be designed to hurt and humiliate you. You need to be prepared for that." I thought of Silas's smiling face in the schoolyard. I thought of the words sick, I'm prepared, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. The official letter was sent the next day. A piece of paper, delivered by certified mail, that was essentially a declaration of war. The act was irreversible. There was no going back to pleading on the porch. The legal machine was now in motion. That night, I stood by the window in Daphne's apartment, looking out at the distant lights of the town. A strange sense of calm settled over me. For 11 years I had been running. Now, I had finally stopped and turned to face the past. The path ahead was a minefield. Sterling would fight me with everything he had. The town would whisper and stare. And Silas might hate me. The thought was a shard of ice in my chest. He might look at me with the same contempt as his father. But for the first time, I felt like I was in the right place. Not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. Being his mother wasn't an optional part of my life I could pick up when it was convenient. It was a fundamental part of who I was, a part I had ignored for too long. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from an unknown number. My breath hitched as I read the words. You have made a huge mistake. It was Sterling. Of course it was. It wasn't a question or a plea. It was a threat, a promise. I looked at the message, the glowing white letters on the black screen. The old me would have been terrified. The old me would have packed her bags and run again. But I wasn't her. I tightened my grip on the phone. This wasn't a mistake. It was a reckoning. And the fight for my son, for my story, for my place in the world had just begun.